Well, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of The Collision Live. It's me, your host, Daniel, and joined at the desk, as I always am, by the fireworks to my 4th of July, Mr. Samuel David Kemp. What is up?
Well, it's good to be with you, Daniel, today on the day after the birth of our country and the day of my birth.
Perhaps a more significant birth. If Sam's looking a little more, grizzly wizened than he was last episode, today is Samuel's birthday. We won't tell you how old he is, but hey, he's getting up there. That cake, those candles are filling up the cake. But hey, I will admit, I thought about.
Could light a small town now.
I thought about bringing you a gift in honor of doing our show together on your birthday, and then I thought, hey, what better gift can I give you than the opportunity to share the stage with me for a live stream?
How very generous.
The gift that keeps giving all year round. Well, thanks for joining us. Sorry, we started a few minutes late. Some crazy stuff going on, technical stuff, because, hey, technology is always crazy. But we're glad you guys are joining us. We got a ton of stuff to get into this week. Some kind of meatier topics, interesting stuff that I think there should be a lot to discuss. So I encourage you, if you're joining us live, don't be shy. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Wish Sam a happy birthday, but also weigh in on some of these issues, because, again, this is some more, I think some more, not controversial, but just a lot of stuff to talk about. If you've never joined us before, this is our weekly live stream or our podcast episode, however you join us, where we just sort of look at everything going on in culture, the crazy, the good, the bad, and just sort of how do we dive in and discuss it as Christians, engage with it, just think critically about it and kind of through the lens of Scripture. Like I said, we got some stuff that I think is going to be interesting for us to talk about this week. So why don't we, quit waffling around, jump right into this with our first segment of our show. We have Pop Culture News. So a couple of sort of general pop culture topics before we get into the more meaty topics and discussions. Probably the first story that we have this week, the new Ghostbusters, following after Ghostbusters Afterlife. They just announced there's a sequel for this. I know, hey, Christians have thoughts about ghosts and things, so there should be a lot to talk about. I wasn't crazy about the first one. That thing is coming. And things that I know everyone seems to be crazy about, Minions, The Rise of Gru. This thing just dropped in theaters last week. It's already breaking records. It's making us a ton of money. People still love these Minions. Also just sort of sheds light a little bit on the contrast with Lightyear, which, again, we don't want to just get into that again. We've got into that several times in this show. But just, the kind of the bomb, the financial bomb that was Lightyear, and this movie is the opposite of that. I think there's definitely, not to overly simplify it, but stuff we can read into as Christians about why one is successful, why one's not successful. But apparently people getting crazy about Minions is not just for kids. Kind of related to this, one of the funniest things I think I've seen for a while. Again, I think TikTok is the bane of all evil in society. And not anything that happens on TikTok, not crazy about, until I saw the viral gentle Minions trend. So if you're not familiar with this is a trend that has been going on in culture, where a bunch of teenagers, kind of Gen Z, dress up in formal attire to attend the Minions in the theater, and like it is the highest work of art form in Western culture. So this thing has been there's been so much of this movement. These people like wearing bow ties to go see Minions and just like going wild in the theaters that movie theaters have actually started banning this movement from theaters. It's been so disruptive. And I don't know about you, but this thing just continues to make me chuckle every time I think about it. But speaking kind of, I mentioned Lightyear, another kind of story that I think is part of maybe a bigger topic that Christians can think about. The whole Lightyear thing, again, there's just been endless conversations to be had about this movie and why it's not doing well, and some of the agendas and stuff. Again, we'll even touch on that a little bit later in the show. Well, Tim Allen, the original voice of Buzz Lightyear, kind of broke his silence a bit on this, as what he thinks of it, because he obviously voiced the original character. He was not brought back for sort of this spin-off, and I don't know. I think it's interesting. I think people maybe on a wider level is sort of an example of sort of some of the dumb side of the culture wars, where all of a sudden everyone acts like they're super invested in Tim Allen's career. I don't know if we can name a movie he's done since Toy Story, but then that whole conversation has definitely kind of been dragged into the center of sort of this culture wars that are happening. Two more quick stories. One, in my review for the Kenobi show, I said, hey, this show I liked it. I think it probably would have been better as a movie. Apparently, it was a movie. This was supposed to be a movie maybe even a trilogy of movies. Then with the Han Solo kind of box office failure, Lucasfilm kind of veered course and tried to go the show route, which I don't know, seems kind of reactionary, maybe too bad. So hey, we can still kind of think about, hey, what would it have been had it been a movie or a trilogy? And the final story, which is maybe queuing us up for some discussions next week, Tessa Thompson, who's a great actress. She's been in a bunch of stuff. She'll be as Valkyrie in the upcoming Thor, Love and Thunder, which is dropping in theaters this week. But it's going to in her press tour to promote this movie. A lot of the conversation, because hey, this is the society we live in, has been about the sexuality of her character and how her bisexuality needed to be a very big deal, or as she said, a big topic of conversation. Again, we'll probably get into that more when the movie's out and we kind of seen it and we can talk about it in our reviews. But again, this seems to be the normal. All these movies. I know Jurassic Park, we had the same stuff. Just kind of this obsession with sexuality and in these characters. But that's all we got this week in pop culture news. So Sam, do you plan to be a gentle minion this week?
Well, I don't know. This is the first I've heard of it, so it shows you how much under a rock I've been living. So I don't know, but I like it. I like anytime there's a chance to dress up and go entertain yourself. I think that's always I'm here for that. Props to those kids.
There's so much bad and stuff on the internet and culture, but just Google gentle minions. Because again, there's like this horde of these teenagers in like bow ties and suits, and they're all like walking into the theater.
I think that's awesome.
We need some laughs in our society, because there's a lot of things to not laugh at, which is maybe a segue into our first.
Speaking of not laughing matters.
Speaking of not laughing, jump into our first kind of major topic for this week, and this is it's a conversation that we've dipped our toes into. We kind of had with Lightyear and some of the controversies with that. Kind of the LGBTQ subplot, but it's sort of been reignited again with some kind of more recent developments and stuff with a new show. But yeah, if you have kids, the idea that like children's entertainment has kind of become the battleground for a lot of sexual politics or just sexual issues, or kind of focusing on that or pushing that or agenda or whatever kind of terminology you want to use for that. Yeah, we can maybe throw it up on the screen. Just the last month being Pride Month, even on like the Disney Plus platform and like their collections, they've been kind of highlighting a Pride banner. And again, if you kind of click into that, you can find all their the shows that kind of explicitly, or some of them maybe more subtly, but kind of deal with Pride issues and LGBTQ stuff. And so this is, again, it's not a new conversation, but kind of what is, I think, the more recent topical expression of this is with the recent show Baymax. It's kind of a spin-off of the, I think it was 2014, Big Hero 6 animated kind of superhero film. A lot of people love this film. It's a good film. So they just dropped, I think a couple of days ago, this spin-off show, and a couple scenes in particular of this show have been just causing a lot of thoughts and stuff on social media. And probably the two main ones I'll kind of unpack if you haven't seen the show, and then we'll kind of discuss kind of what this means for entertainment and what Christians should do about this. But kind of the two moments in this show that has caused a lot of heat online. One features the character of Baymax. He's trying to help a 12-year-old girl that's got her first period, and he goes to the store to kind of get some tampons and pads for her. And in this scene, he's asking, suggestions for what products they recommend, and various characters are, you have like a mom, you have a dad buying something for his kid, and among those characters is a transgender character who's wearing the shirt, kind of the transgender flag on his shirt, and making suggestions, very not subtly, kind of the whole conversation about the periods and transgenderism. So that was sort of the big one that caused the big spark. Almost overshadowed in that conversation, the episode 4, the next episode, features a kind of a overarching metaphor and very eventually more overt of a same-sex couple, where Baymax ultimately helps one male character kind of find courage in himself to ask another male character on a date, and that's sort of how the episode ends. So episodes 3 and 4 in that show. So I thought we'd get into that. Again, we'll have a review for the actual show, and we'll probably get into some of the more details specifically. But I thought for our conversation here, and if you guys want to join us online, is just sort of, what does this mean? Like, obviously this is becoming more and more common sort of these controversial sexual issues and identity conversations more and more present in children's entertainment. So what do you think? You see this? Does this make you mad? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, I think it just brings to light that I think two things can be true. That one, there is or there are sort of Hollywood agendas, and particularly like sort of focused on the kids. And two, we should not be surprised when Hollywood acts and behaves like Hollywood. And we've sort of touched on this before. And I think the difference here is like when you're making children's films, I think there are like I would give way more caution and probably be more upset about the content in those films than if it was just some PG-13 movie. But yeah, I mean, I think it is an issue, and I think there's lots of issues that kids can learn about and can, I think even be taught through shows, and that's nothing new. I think these specific issues, like it seems like sexuality is kind of the only thing that they want to touch on, or the main thing that they want to touch on for children. It's like better, start early so that you know about sexuality.
Because that is the again, I think and I've said before, like I resist a little bit some of the where just sort of everything's the culture war, and just I'm mad about this, now I'm mad about this, and sort of that reactionary, like just kind of outrage about every specific kind of, not that I agree with those specific things, but I think sometimes that kind of sort of in the moment, maybe you lose sight of like the bigger, like I'm more grossed out or frustrated, or again, as a father of two young kids, like more by like the bigger picture trend of like what this symbolizes, rather than just like, hey, here's a show, I just won't let my kids watch that. But this, this whole trend of kind of using entertainment, especially like children's entertainment, as sort of this like fertile ground to like expose them to ideologies, and especially like the sexual stuff. Like,
Yeah.
I think in some ways, like, yes, these moments and these scenes, like I think Christians should share their thoughts on those. But I think like at a larger, maybe like a larger like bird's eye level is like a reflection to me of like here's like a culture that so much of this identity like is just sort of wrapped up in sex. Like everything is sex, and like who you are deep depends on the way you see sex or don't see sex, or so much of that it's you sort of have like that imposed then on children who clearly aren't there. These are not sexual beings.
Yeah.
This is pre-puberty. Some 6-year-old isn't sort of seeing the world just through sexual orientation or desire or whatever you want to call it. That I don't know. So it's not like Sam's like, it's not surprising to me, but I do think it is it's an icky thing of like you have these adult kind of creators that just sort of see the world through the lens of sex. And it's like, well, now we got to tell stories for kids rather than like tell a story kind of through the lens of childhood. It's like, here's what we find important. Like you need to think of that too.
Well, and I think something that illustrates this really well, and we've talked about it in a previous episode, is just how I think a lot of the LGBTQ community kind of latched on to what seemed like a same-sex attraction in the movie Luca, and it's like, or these are two boys who are friends and they are building Vespas and like just being boys. And it's like suddenly we've, just forgotten that there's anything called like friendship among same genders that has actually nothing to do with sex. And it's actually before sex even enters the picture or the mind of a child. But it seems that like we can't even let like childhood be a place.
Are you suggesting that not everything's about sex?
I am actually. Yeah, that is that surprisingly and shocking to many.
Hashtag hot take.
Yeah, no, like, and I think that's the really, I think in some ways the hill worth dying on is like let children be children and have a childhood that's not just infused with all this gender ideology or just sexuality of any kind. Like it's not even necessarily you know, gay, straight, trans, whatever. It's like, how about they just be kids without sexuality? Because
Yeah, like working through kids' issues that kids are working through, rather than like trying to like shape them to prepare them for the issues that they will have in like 10 years or something. And I do think like it's intentional. Again, like I'm very much not like as much of like an alarmist as a lot of like social media and stuff. But I think there's no, it'd be foolish not to see sort of what's happening and like assume that like they know what they're doing. Like the reason, like, you know, it's not a mistake that a lot of these issues that are like sort of above the heads of kids are in children's like shows. It's because they're trying, children have always sort of been that like very impressionable, like it's easier to convince a child of something than it is to, cause like I've said before, like I don't necessarily have a problem with some of the same sex stuff just in movies. I think I think you can like dialogue about those, but like, I think in a world where Christians can share our worldview in movies, like non-believers and people who have other worldviews have every right to tell their stories, and we can vote with your wallet or critique it or talk about it and all that stuff. But when it comes to like children, though, it's like the sneaky, the sneaky element. And like, again, like I watched, we'll have a review coming up. Like I watched through the Baymax thing, and like there's some of the ways they frame like both of those episodes. It just seems very intentionally done to try and like kind of like normalize and like introduce things to children that, again, like they're not, like they're not adults. Like even just beyond the sexual stuff, I think there's issues. And a book, I know I've mentioned it before, but I think it's become increasingly becoming like a must read for Christians. The author himself, I don't believe was a Christian, but The Disappearance of Childhood by Neil Postman. Again, this is written years ago, before a lot of the stuff was happening. He mostly focuses on like TV and stuff, and that was sort of the new thing beyond cinema. But like he just nails it in that book, and like sort of his sort of argument, like how childhood disappears is through media. Like, so before, like, with the printing press, like the dividing line was basically the ability to read. That a lot of the more mature topics and stuff like depended on a child developing enough to be able to read and like expose themselves to that when they were ready. Or like TV, and I think by extension like media, has just like obliterated that dividing line, where like now it doesn't take comprehension really you can more passively take in the visuals of like some of these messages, or like the sexuality stuff, and like that, like now there really is no, like, you have child shows like dealing with very adult themes, and children can just be exposed to it because it doesn't require anything of them. Like, and I think that's where there is danger in it.
Yeah, I certainly think so, and I think I just think that's what parents should be aware of, and I think that is something worth pushing back on in our culture today. And I think we said it here before, and you've said it. It just we shouldn't be surprised and up in arms when a lost world behaves like a lost world. But I do think you can take stands and push back on this stuff when it comes to kids, because I think that's really, I think, where the battleground seems to be, at least is where a lot of Hollywood wants it to be right now.
Yeah, and I think that is too. I think we should still make a stand, but why I think it's important for Christians to be plugged in with what is, like obviously a very a movie that's very based and promoted on some of those issues is easier to navigate, but increasingly like the stuff that's just available for all kids to just sort of watch, sort of sneakily snuck in there. I do think Christian parents need to be more engaged and looking up and doing some of their homework. We can't necessarily trust sort of the unbelieving society to put those sort of limits and stuff on it. But let us know, so if you're a parent or just a Christian kind of thinking through this, maybe some of the ways that this seems to reflect where our country is at, where our society is at, and just sort of this obsession with sexuality that even is filtering into kids who are not yet sexual people themselves, and sort of some of that. We'd love to have that conversation with you. But another conversation that I know Sam would love to have with me is our next segment of our show. We have Host Corner. So I'll be honest, this is July 4th weekend. This sort of live stream. We didn't have a Monday. It was a holiday, so Tuesday kind of snuck up on us and live stream. I realized, hey, it's my turn for Host Corner. I don't really know what to talk about. Didn't want to dig into the archives to find some new metal genre that I wanted to do. I wanted to do those justice. So I thought I'd just take a moment and just sort of share one of the things that I think can be a tool for Christians, but just for all people, and that is just audiobooks. I'm a book nerd. Again, I read physical books all the time. I got a big stack beside my chair. I'm always reading. I've been very outspoken about this, how important it is, I think, for Christians to be readers and to deal with ideas and like classic novels. But one of the things that people who I kind of often hear from people is, I just don't have time to read. That's cool for you, but I'm so busy with other stuff, and I don't like reading. I'm a slow reader. It takes you too long. Well, that is why we have audiobooks. These things are glorious. I constantly, at all times, have at least one audiobook going. I listen to it before I go to bed. I listen to it while I'm making lunch. I listen to it while I'm walking the dog. I listen to it before bed, for 30 minutes or so. I probably go through maybe almost 20 to 30 audiobooks a year. A lot of these classic books that I've always wanted to read maybe, and I just haven't had the time with all the work and other stuff. And hey, I just race through it in my audiobook, just filling up time that would otherwise be wasted with this terrible radio songs and pop hits and stuff. Turn that stuff off. Turn on an audiobook, read a classic, or have it read to you. And again, easy way for all people to kind of catch up on some of those books that they have always wanted to read and just never said they never had the time to. But no, I think this is one that you might not be into my kind of Scandinavian, fantasy metal. But I think we do share love for audiobooks.
Definitely. And two things I would mention about audiobooks is, one, bonus points if it's read by a British accent.
Absolutely.
And two, you can listen, at various speeds. So
if it's boring, hey, there's no shame in going to that 1.7 or something.
I haven't gone that fast, but still make it legible at a speed. But and another thing, because if Audible is a very popular source for audiobooks, but if you don't want to pay a subscription, you can check with your local library, which every time I go to our local library, I'm always amazed at how amazing libraries are. And there are just so many resources that are at your fingertips that are free to check out. And I always forget how amazing a library is until I go. But a lot of libraries now, and you'll have to check with your own, but have apps that you get access to with your library card. And so I listen to a lot of audiobooks through our library. I think I can listen to up to 15 a month, and that's free. Now there's obviously going to be some titles that aren't available, but there's tons of classics. Like if you want to get through some classic literature, they're all going to be free.
Yeah, because I tend to use it for, I mostly do fiction, because then I read nonfiction physicals, so I can underline and stuff in the pages. But I usually use it either for a classic that I just have wanted to read and just haven't had time, or else to kind of catch up on books that I don't really want to invest in, but I want to have read. Like I know your wife, my sister, and is listening to The Handmaid's Tale. I just bought that on my Audible once I finished my current book, just because, not necessarily that it's a book that I have been wanting to read for my own enjoyment, but it's such a conversation. It's always used there that, hey, I wanted to check it out and kind of just engage with some of that. So I got it for Audible. I'll kind of listen to that while I'm doing other things and sort of stay alert. So hey, if you've never done that, again, I encourage you, read real books. They're fun. They smell nice. But if you can't do that...
they look good on shelves.
They look good on shelves. They make you feel pompous. So do that. But if you can't do audiobooks, whether your library or Audible or however you find them, and it's just a way for Christians to kind of be more engaged in some of the literature and stuff going on. But we're coming off a long weekend. I don't have a clever segue for our next topic. So we'll just move right into it, which I think is that there is a lot to talk about, too, with this. Again, Chris Pratt... I like Chris Pratt. A lot of people like Chris Pratt. A lot of people don't like Chris Pratt. So we'll kind of get into it. But he had an interview, and we've talked about him in various times on this show. But maybe a week ago, he was interviewed in Men's Health magazine. And it's just a fascinating interview on multiple levels. There's a little bit of profanity in there. So if you are, I warned you, but I do think it's something that's worth reading this sort of to get a picture of some kind of larger issues as he sort of talks about. Again, he sort of has the stigma of being one of like the Christians and the religious people in Hollywood, one of the few. So again, that brings him a lot of hate and a lot of expectations from the other side that he should be more and or he shouldn't be too much and all that stuff. You get kind of the center of some of this discussion. So we're not going to go through the whole thing. It's a long interview, but I do think it's worth pulling it up. I think it's free on the Men's Health website, so you can read it. But I do think there's a couple segments that I wanted us to discuss. I feel like there's several nuggets in here. So I'll kind of skim through this if you're just listening. But he says a few years ago, he explains he was asked to give a speech at MTV Movie and TV Awards as the recipient of some award, Lifetime Achievement. So he's standing next to the trophy, a golden popcorn, said he spoke from his heart. He said, God is real. God loves you. God wants what's best for you. He also said, don't be a turd. But most people mostly just remember the God part. And then kind of a little further down in the interview says, maybe it was hubris, but for me to stand up on stage and say the things that I said, I'm not sure I touched anyone. He offers, and he gets why people were put off. He says, religion has been oppressive as bleep for a long time. It says, as they walked over the footbridge, I didn't know I would become the face of religion when really I'm not a religious person. I think there's a distinction between being religious, adhering to the customs created by man, oftentimes appropriating the awe reserved for who I believe is a very real God, and using it to control people, to take their money, to abuse children, to steal land, to justify hatred. Whatever it is, the evil that's in the heart of every single man is glommed onto the back of religion and come along for the ride. So again, there's a lot of stuff in the whole interview, especially this sort of segment of it that I thought would be interesting, to talk about. Hey, let's make Chris Pratt the face of religion for our live stream and talk about some of this. Because I do think there are several maybe kind of bigger conversations, and it is, Sam was saying, we were talking before this live stream, that his sort of takeaway from the interview is, hey, maybe I shouldn't curse so much. I know that will be kind of a turnoff for some people. Who won't be impressed with his use of language, but kind of maybe looking beyond just that, kind of some of the deeper stuff. I think there's a lot in here to kind of get into. But what are your takeaway from this?
Yeah, and I haven't. I was going to try and read it over the weekend, but I did not. But I'm sort of vaguely familiar with the interview and especially the parts that you read. But I think one thing is that you probably shouldn't be getting your theology from an actor, and it could be your favorite actor in the whole wide world, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're an authority when it comes to religion or how you should view God or how you should live a Christian life. And so I think on the one hand, I think these characters like Pratt, I think, tend to become, idolized on the one hand. So I think the church can oftentimes sort of just overly emphasize their Christianity and how great they are. And then, obviously people on the other side sort of villainize him for, being a bigot and whatever else. And so I think, one, you shouldn't do that. But I also think that, this is somebody in Hollywood who is trying to figure out their faith, and they're going to get things right and they're going to get things wrong. And again, like, they're just because they at least express sort of a shared belief, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to agree with everything that they say or don't say. Yeah, and I do think that again, and that's not necessarily even to call into question his faith or the legitimacy of that. Just that, hey, just because he is someone that's like has like a public platform, he's famous. I think there's just this, and again, the scripture speaks often against this kind of mindset of just elevating the people that are like famous and kind of putting them on this pedestal. They're our champion. Like, you have all the Hollywood and unbelievers, they have all those actors, but we have Chris Pratt and he's cool. He's not one of those lame Christian guys. And like, there's sort of this expectation that like he, because of that, like now he is sort of the face of our religion and he has to act a certain way and not speak a certain way and speak a certain way. And because I've even seen people kind of on the Christian side of it, criticizing his comment at the start about like, hey, on the stage I sing God loves you and all that stuff, and kind of him questioning like maybe that wasn't the best thing to do. Like
maybe I shouldn't have, I've seen some Christians like, how dare he? The Bible says, be bold, proclaim the word. And, is he just trying to hide his faith and trying to, be lukewarm? And I really don't think, again, one, it's easier for us to criticize, armchair Christian about, if I was famous on a public stage, I would have been, given my sermon. But just sort of this expectation that that he has to act or kind of represent or be the spokesperson, because we don't apply that always to ourselves. Like every time I go to the grocery store and checkout counter or get my hair cut or get my car fixed, it's not like every time we have a chance to be in front of someone, it's did you know that God, not that you don't do that, you should share. But again, I think we focus on sort of that public, he needs to be our spokesperson. We kind of see even a lot of his kind of not very much not kind of religious people like James Gunn, the director, and some of his colleagues and stuff who are very outspoken against Christian things, quickly jump into his defense and this is a great guy. He lives what he he backs up what he says. I feel like as Christians on the outside, there is a tendency to ignore the fact that clearly he's having an influence with the people that's actually in his life, and just have this expectation that but you need to kind of give some. Because again, I agree with him. I don't necessarily think anyone's eternal salvation is going to be changed by the fact that we diminish all the time. When non-believing celebrities speak on the stage, say who cares? That's not going to change anyone's mind. But then when a Christian does it, then it's open the gates of heaven. So I don't know.
I totally agree, and I think it's a much bigger sort of kudos to him for the way his circle of influence has reacted to sort of attacks against him than anything that he's going to say in defense of the church or, I think regardless of what he says or doesn't say, the fact that he is in good standing and people like him and he's a good guy and he does practice what he preaches. I think that's a bigger deal and shouldn't be overlooked more so than he said the wrong thing here, or, he should have said this there. I think the bigger issue is just how he's living his life, in his sphere of influence. And I think that's something to be, I think, commended for sure.
Yeah, because there's definitely, there is this kind of danger of these forced expectations that he should be something that I don't think he has to be. Not every Christian just, you don't become a spokesperson just based on your fame. But I do think the other part of this interview that we can maybe get into just for a second, is sort of the way that he kind of, he's saying he's not religious. And I think because it in a lot of ways, I think it represents, it's sort of a reflection maybe of a mindset that's very common in sort of evangelicalism and the church right now of Pratt himself doesn't say it this way, but it's it's not a religion, it's a relationship.
Yeah.
You hear that all the time. We hear that in our church. I've heard that for years from people. I'm sure I've said that at various times. And I think there's a lot of good and truth in that okay, it's not, we're not burning, doves and goats and stuff at the, these ritual, it is a relationship. Things have changed since Jesus and the veil tore and all of that. But I think maybe the unintended consequences a bit where things get a little more messy is taking that so far where it's because Pratt very much seems kind of apologetic, trying to distance, I'm a Christian, but I'm not one of those Christians. I'm not a religious Christian. I
didn't go to Hillsong Church.
Yeah, I didn't, later in the interview, he's very clear. I don't even know anyone that's that has attended Hillsong Church, and kind of distancing from some of that. And I don't know. I think sometimes I roll my eyes with that because I hear people say that, and it's we say it in church. This isn't a religion. This is a relationship, and as we're all, at a certain time in church, and now let's do communion, and then turn your eyes to the baptism. Someone gets baptized, and we do all these very religious things that God instituted. Then but we're not religious. We just do religious things, and I think it is sort of a way to I think the stigma of the church and religion is so bad right now in wider culture that it's sort of. It's trying in a little bit to be me and God, but don't worry about those other people.
Yeah, well, the danger of that is you kind of become the Lone Ranger Christian, just you have no church affiliation and you're just out there on your own, sort of winging it, and that'll get you in all sorts of trouble. But I think there is sort of this reaction to organized religion or the church that, apparently all we see come out of religion is just all the horrible things that have happened through history, and we somehow forget like all of the things, essentially modernity that has been as a result of the church, and all of the great things that religion has brought to us. And so there is just sort of this, I think, just reaction from people to try and like quickly say, well, I'm not religious, or if there's a failing in one church, it's like, well, I'm not, I don't go to that church, or like, that's not, when I say Christian, I don't mean, that. And I get the sort of the tendency to want to do that, but it's also like, you don't want to throw like the baby out with the bathwater as well. And I think it's like, well, wait a second, like this is sort of how, Jesus set things up. And it's like, don't be so quick to just sort of say, oh, well, I'm not religious, or I'm not at that church. It's like, well, I mean, there are ways that God sort of ordained things. And I think that doesn't mean that we excuse bad behavior, or that we condone things that the church got wrong, but it's still the church.
Yeah, because there is very much and Chris Pratt is kind of right in the line of doing that, but also not doing that, of like, because I've seen it all the time with like, and I think people have even had trouble with this interview with like him kind of saying negative things about the church being oppressive and throughout history and stuff. And like I've seen a trend of people that it's like, well, the Crusades were bad, but that was really more political, and it wasn't this, and all the witch hunt, and this was bad, but those weren't the real Christians. You kind of follow that train of thought down, and like eventually it's like anyone that said they were a Christian in the name of religion that did bad stuff, they weren't the real Christians. Like the real Christians are the ones apparently that like never do bad stuff, and in that process, like you end up just sort of missing the entire point of like the gospel, the fact that like,
right,
of course Christians are doing bad stuff, like that's why Jesus came, because like,
right, that's the whole point.
Get it wrong. we abuse things, we distort scripture, it's for slavery and all sorts of awful things. I think Christians should, like I think Pratt, like be very open about the fact that hey, we always say we're not perfect, we're just like you, but then we kind of excuse away anything that seems like it's not perfect. But I do think maybe there's a line in there of like, how do you do that without sort of like almost buying into this very like individualistic, like, we just sort of get rid of religion, and it's just sort of me and God, and we don't have issues like everyone else. And like, in some ways, like that seems more hubris to me than like what he was saying, like just telling people God loves them on a stage, like, where it's sort of like, I got it right, so don't worry about all the ones that didn't get it right, because like
it's that tendency to just sort of try and erase all the bad things that came before, and just like, well, today, the way that I'm doing it, or the way that this church is doing it, that's the right way to do it, until a few years from now when that church messes up, and it's like, well, obviously, like that's why I had to get out of there and go to this church, or so I think there is obviously. I think a big part of it is just how you deal with those failings in the church, and I think also just kind of knowing the history of the church. I think that's why that's helpful to put some of these historical things into context, and to understand, like, so why did these things happen, and what does that mean, and how did they get it wrong, and what can we learn from that, rather than just sort of like blindly like, oh, close that closet door quickly, and we'll just move on to these other nice things that we would like you to see. And so I think part of that is just recognizing that the church is made up of sinful people, but the thing that is uniting us all together is the gospel, and that relationship to Christ. And so I think it is very much a relationship, but it's also, you can't help it be religious.
Yeah, it ends up kind of, at least in some way, manifesting in some kind of religious activity and order. And but again, that's why I think this interview, not that we want to just like, because Pratt was famous, now we need to sort of take all this truth from him. But I think in a lot of ways he reflects a lot of the mindsets, both in the church, then the reaction from outside the church. Yeah. So let us know what you guys think of that. If you guys check out that interview, sort of how do you ride that line? How do you navigate some of those issues that that he brings up. He'll say, Chuck, thanks for joining us. He says, better late than never. Sorry for starting a little late. Steven says, happy birthday, Sam.
Thank you, Steven.
And Don said, Pratt blasphemed Jesus in Avengers, did he not? I don't remember. I do think there, which maybe is a topic for another show, like there is sort of a weird line of like, as an actor, like, again, we might disagree with how they do that, but like that his characters are not always a reflection of like him.
Right.
And, like, if he's playing someone that's not a Christian, and like, again, I think that, there is definitely gray areas in there. Like, I'm a Christian, but I just commit adultery and like have sex and stuff on camera. My character, I know it's messier than that, but I don't always read too much into what a character says as a reflection of
who they are as a person.
Who they are as a person. But anyway, maybe that'd be a good topic for us to get into in a future episode. But the last thing we got this week. This week on The Collision, got a lot of exciting things going on here. One, which we've sort of announced before, that, hey, this might potentially be our last episode in this studio. If we're here next week, then no, it's coming soon. But we've been working on a new studio, kind of expanding. The Collision's growing. So kind of putting together a brand new fancy, snazzy studio. So stay tuned for that. Another thing that we just launched here at The Collision, we call it the Monthly Blast. Again, some of you guys probably just join us through our videos, but we also have a website. We do a lot of articles and kind of engaging with culture, written movie reviews, and it's going to be a lot to keep up with. So if you go to thecollision.org, sign up for the Monthly Blast. At the start of every month, we send you an email with sort of hand-picked reviews and articles and kind of cultural commentary and just resources that we think would be helpful to help you kind of process everything going on last month and sort of moving into the next month. So I encourage you, sign up for our Monthly Blast. And lastly, just check out our reviews. We got a lot of movies coming out, a lot of movies that have been out. Minions, again, we just dropped a review for that. It came out this weekend. I wasn't a gentle minion, but I did attend the movie, and I did a review for that. If you haven't checked it out already, our Lightyear review, obviously a very controversial movie. So I do my best to kind of walk you through why that is and kind of how Christians can engage. Got a lot of movies coming up. Stay tuned. Probably tomorrow we'll have a review for Baymax, another controversial thing, kind of walking through some of those issues with you. And then I'll be seeing Thor, Love and Thunder this weekend. So stay tuned. Probably at some point on Friday, we'll be releasing our review for that. So lots of movies, a lot of stuff to engage with. Hope you'll join us for that. Any kind of final thoughts here? Birthday boy, give you the last word tonight.
No, I think that'll
profound and articulate as always. But thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for joining us. Stay safe and continue to collide with your world for Christ.